Hello everyone. One of the major drivers of organ dysfunction in critical illness is the loss of iron regulation at a cellular level. Iron is essential for life, but excess free iron also generates oxidative injury and fuels infection. This is why critically ill patients often develop very low serum iron levels as a part of this protective physiological response. Today we'll revisit how iron is regulated in the blood, some of which is usually taught very early in medical school, but more importantly, we'll discuss how iron is regulated at the cellular level, which is often less talked about. This will give you a deeper understanding of anemia in hospitalized patient, and you will start seeing hemoglobin and serum iron levels with a whole new perspective. Welcome to ICU Physiology Insights. Here the goal is to move beyond the surface level thinking. We discuss pathophysiology, mechanisms, and evidence in medicine to better take care of our patients. To start with, you need to know how iron is absorbed from the gut. This is explained very well in this lecture by Dr. Matt and Dr. Mike. The links are in description below. Let's start this iron journey once iron is absorbed inside the enterocyte. Once inside the enterocyte, ferrous form is either stored as ferritin or transported out. For transporting it out, the cells uses a channel called ferroportin. Now, ferroportin is the only known mammalian cellular iron exporter out of the cell. Once out of the enterocyte into the plasma, the ferrous form has to be converted back to ferric form, and this is achieved by the enzyme hephaestin and celluloplasmin. The ferric form is then taken up by transferrin to be transported to different areas in the body. Iron levels in plasma is tightly regulated by hepcidin. If the systemic iron stores are high, hepatocytes release hepcidin into the blood. Hepcidin works by directly binding to ferroportin, induces their internalization and degradation by the lysosomes. Since ferroportin is the only way out of the cell into the bloodstream, the iron is trapped inside the enterocytes. So absorption can happen on the luminal side, but the iron cannot enter the bloodstream. The absorbed iron is stored as ferritin. Since enterocytes' lifespan is about 3 to 5 days, these iron-rich enterocytes are sloughed out into the stool. So if your patient has high circulating hepcidin, oral iron supplementation is kind of useless. You can eat all the steak, but it's not getting in. Thus, the body controls the extra iron by stopping the absorption of iron. Unfortunately, there is no physiological pathway for active iron excretion. So evolutionarily, it seemed that iron was a pretty precious commodity, so cells never evolved to learn active iron excretion. The second source of iron is from macrophages. These are iron recycling plants, clearing around 20 to 25 milligrams of iron daily. Macrophages constantly phagocytose senescent red blood cells, breaking down the hemoglobin and recycling iron back to the plasma via ferroportin. When hepcidin levels are high, it also destroys the ferroportin on these macrophages as well. Thus, similar to enterocytes, the iron is trapped inside the macrophages as well. So, hepcidin completely cuts off a supply line from both the gut and the recycling centers simultaneously, reducing the serum iron levels. This increased production of hepcidin is regulated via BMP-SMAD pathway. It's an interesting acronym: bone morphogenetic protein, that's your BMP, and mothers against decapentaplasic, that's your SMAD. Increased iron stores in the sinusoidal endothelial cells are stimulus for BMP6 synthesis. BMP6 is sensed by the hepatocytes via BMP receptor and hemoglobin, and via SMAD pathway, they upregulate hepcidin synthesis and secretion. Now, macrophages are other source of hepcidin as well, though they use it for local iron regulation, not for the systemic ones. So, splenic macrophages, Kupffer cells in liver, and alveolar macrophages synthesize and secrete their own local pools of hepcidin. Some other organs like PCT in kidneys and cardiomyocytes have a local paracrine network of hepcidin production for local iron regulation. If iron levels are low, the erythropoietin production is stimulated by a hypoxia-inducing factor 2-alpha pathway in the peritubular interstitial fibroblast cells in the kidneys. And this is where you have to understand this nuance. At the systemic level, the cells are sensing hypoxia and not anemia for iron regulation. So hypoxemia is deeply intertwined with iron regulation in the human system. There are some other factors like angiotensin II, thyroid hormone, and testosterone that can modulate the sensitivity of this control. Erythropoietin stimulates release of erythropoietin from erythroblast. This binds to BMP6, thereby halting the SMAD4 pathway. This stops the hepcidin production. Once hepcidin is low or absent, ferroportin can restart transport of iron from enterocytes and macrophages into the blood. Note that enterocytes and macrophages have to resynthesize that ferroportin as the older ones have been destroyed. Now let's look at the next step, transferrin. Let's learn a little bit more about this molecule. This is the iron transporter in the blood. The circulating transferrin has 2 ferric iron binding sites. We use percentage saturation of transferrin to identify iron deficiency anemia in a normal person. Over 90% of systemic transferrin is synthesized and secreted by hepatocytes. Now, transferrin levels in the serum are not fixed. When intracellular hepatic iron stores drop, the liver increases transferrin production to maximize systemic iron scavenging capacity. Transferrin is also part of hypoxia response element, so it can be triggered by HIF-1 alpha pathway in presence of hypoxemia. Once produced, it lasts in circulation for about 7 to 10 days. When the cells need iron, they express transferrin receptor on the cell membrane, and transferrin binds to the transferrin receptor and is then endocytosed. After endocytosis, cells activate ATP-dependent proton pumps embedded in the endosomal membrane. The hydrogen ions drop the endosome pH from a neutral of 7 to around 5.5, and that acidic environment will induce a conformational change in the transferrin protein, releasing the ferric iron. Since iron is in its ferric form, it is trapped inside the endosomes. So cells use another metal reductase located in the endosomal membrane called STEAP3. And STEAP3 reduces this ferric back into ferrous state. And once in its ferrous form, another transporter called divalent metal transporter will transport the ferrous form out of the endosome. And this ferrous form constitutes something we call a labile iron pool inside the cell. Now this ferrous form has 3 fates. It can be used for metabolic processes by mitochondria, stored as ferritin, or transported out via ferroportin. Now iron is used in mitochondria for making heme and iron sulfur clusters. Mitochondria uses specialized transporter located on the inner membrane called mitopherins to transport the ferrous ions inside the mitochondria. We'll not go into the details of heme synthesis, but know that this is a very crucial for making oxygen-carrying molecules like hemoglobin, myoglobin, and component of electron transport chain and nitric oxide synthase. Cells cannot survive without this process. Similarly, without iron-sulfur cluster, electron transport chain cannot work. Now, it's interesting to note that the heme formation occurs so close to the leaky electron of the electron transport chain. And to prevent this catastrophe, mitochondria has evolved to minimize this by forming a metabolon. So the enzymes responsible for heme biosynthesis and mitoferrin delivery transporters, they physically dock and associate with each other to form a multi-protein complex, as shown in this figure. This metabolon channels the ferrous ion directly from one enzyme to the next without it ever diffusing into the general matrix. So this complex prevents the highly reactive iron form from ever interacting with the reactive oxygen species. Now, if the iron is not used up, it is stored as ferritin. And ferritin is not one molecule like transferrin. It's actually a protein complex composed of 24 subunits arranged as a hollow shell in which iron atom is stored as ferric form. And this is how it looks like. It really looks like a case for the iron. The 24 subunit shell of ferritin is made up of ferritin heavy chains and ferritin light chains. The ferritin heavy chains also has ferroxidase activity, which converts ferrous into ferric ion, which is the storage form. One ferritin molecule can store up to 4,000 atoms of iron. Now let's see how this ferritin is used in the time of need. Now cells mainly retrieve ferritin through a process called ferritinophagy. And the key protein here is the nuclear receptor coactivator 4, NCOA4, which acts as a cargo receptor. In iron deficiency state, NCOA attaches to the ferritin macromolecule, binds to ferritin heavy chain, and drags it into autophagosome. The autophagosome then fuses with the lysosome, where protein shell is digested by acid and enzymes, and ferric iron is converted to ferrous in a controlled manner. Under normal or high intracellular iron, the levels of NCOA are kept very low. The excess iron attaches to NCOA4, which targets it for ubiquitination via HERC2 pathway. This results in degradation of NCOA4 in proteosomes. Now we know how iron moves around in plasma and cells. Let's examine how cells figure out whether to store it or kick it out of the cell. The cellular iron is regulated by two iron regulatory proteins, IRP1 and IRP2. These are the iron sensors. These iron sensors interact with iron-responsive elements called IREs on mRNA of ferritin, ferroportin, DMT1 and transferrin receptor proteins. And this is a classical example of post-transcription regulation. Presence of IRE on the mRNA of these proteins can either continue translation or give signal to destroy it. And these choices depend on location of IRE on the mRNA. So let's understand this in detail. If the iron-responsive element is at 5' end of the mRNA, translation proceeds without problem. These are the mRNA of ferritin and ferroportin. If the iron-responsive elements are at 3' end of mRNA, endonucleases will destroy them. And these are mRNA of transferrin receptor and DMT1. So let's see how they interact to maintain iron levels in the cell. When cellular stores of iron are high, the iron regulatory proteins level decrease. How? The IRP1 acquires iron sulfur cluster and changes its form into the enzyme aconitase for the Krebs cycle and is thus unable to interact with iron responsive elements, while IRP2 is targeted for ubiquitination by iron sensitive pathway and degraded in the proteosomes. When the cellular levels of iron are low, IRP level increase. The IRP1 loses its iron sulfur cluster and is now active. Similarly, due to low levels of iron, IRP2 is not getting destroyed by the proteasome, so its level also increase. In iron deficient states, the IRP levels are high. Now IRP can bind to both 5' and 3' ends of iron responsive elements on the mRNA. When IRPs bind 3' end, it protects the mRNA from endonuclease degradation. This affects the transferrin receptor and DMT1, which can now be synthesized. As we know, increased number of transferrin receptors and DMT1 helps the cell take up more iron. When IRP binds the 5' end, the ribosomes cannot efficiently initiate translation and therefore protein synthesis decreases. This affects the mRNA of ferritin and ferroportin, whose levels now decrease. This conserves the labile iron pool by stopping iron exit via ferroportin and iron storage in ferritin. This acts in conjunction with the NCOA4 activity, which we discussed previously, which helps digest ferritin to release iron. So in low cellular iron state, IRPs regulate towards more iron uptake and decreased iron exit. If iron levels are high in the cell, both the IRP levels are low. So IREs don't interact with IRPs. This results in transcription of mRNA with IREs on the 5' end, but degradation of mRNA where IREs are at 3' end. This results in increased synthesis of ferritin and ferroportin molecules while decreasing synthesis of DMT1 and transferrin receptors. This drives the cell towards increasing storage and export while simultaneously decreasing uptake of iron. So hopefully you now know the whole pathway starting from iron absorption and its transfer to the cell and what processes occur inside the cell. This figure summarizes the whole process. In high iron state, hepcidin degrade ferroportin, so iron cannot enter the bloodstream. Inside the cell, iron regulatory proteins are detached from the iron responsive elements, resulting in downregulation of transferrin receptor to stop further influx of iron and upregulation of ferritin for storing extra iron. In low iron states, erythropoietin is secreted, which via erythroferrone inhibits hepcidin production, and ferroportin is allowed to dump its iron into the bloodstream. The iron regulatory proteins are now attached to the iron responsive elements, resulting in upregulation of transferrin receptor to enhance influx of iron. One final thing I want to reiterate, at a cellular level, iron is regulated as per the concentration of the labile iron pool, But at the systemic level, iron regulation is fundamentally an oxygen management strategy. Now, this is far more complex than it first appears. In medicine, very little is truly binary. Cells are constantly balancing multiple competing demands at the same time. Different receptor subtypes and regulatory pathways can respond differently to the same stimuli, yet together they work towards preserving cellular and organism survival. With this foundation, we can start connecting these mechanisms to real clinical problems, like why ferritin rises in critical illness, how anemia of inflammatory disease develops, why IV iron can sometimes backfire. We'll also explore emerging concepts such as ferroptosis and novel sepsis therapies designed to target these specific pathways. Hope this was helpful. Thank you.